Hello friends, today I'm going to solve LeetCode problem number 54, spiral matrix. So in this problem we are given a rectangular matrix. It's of size m times n, and we need to return all the elements of the matrix in a spiral order. So what does a spiral order mean? It means that starts from the first element, it goes from left to right, and then from top to bottom, and then from right to left, and then from bottom to top, but it doesn't go all the way back to the top, just one less than the top, and then keeps on continuing the same process. So in this case it's doing the same from left to right, from top to bottom, from right to left, from bottom to top minus one, and then from again like left to right, and it will continue, keep on continuing. All right, so how can we now solve this problem? Okay, let's look at this example over here and try to come up with a solution. So what's happening is, okay, let me just write down the indices here. So what's happening here, we are moving from row, so the row is constant here. Okay, this is the row. So now we are moving over the row, right, over the row. So we are moving from column 0 to column number 2. Okay, I'm just going to write it this way. Next, what are we doing is, now we are moving over the column, right, over the last column. So our row is going to change now. So we move from row 0 to row number 2, which is the last row, and then the column remains the same, right, which is the end column here, last column. Next, what are we doing is, now since we have traversed this far, okay, so one edit that we need to make is, while we are traversing over the row, we are already traversing all the columns of the row, right, 0 1 2. Now while we are traversing this way, okay, from top to bottom, we see that since we have already traversed 1 2 3, we don't need to traverse 0 here again, right, that is the zeroth row in the last column, right, because we already have traversed that. So what are we going to do is, we just start from the next row. Okay, so here our row would start from 1. Okay, so if this is the starting row, okay, and that would be start row plus 1. Okay, so we are increasing our start row by 1. Okay, and then this becomes our start row. So now we are for our end column. Okay, this is the end column, so that will happen. It's the similar case here. Now we have already traversed the end column, right, all the like last row, the last, this basically this cell, right, while we are traversing over the end column. So now next, while we are traversing from right to left, we start from this index. Okay, this one, that is end column minus 1. Okay, so what we do is end column minus 1, and we traverse over the last row, which is the last row. And okay, so this is the last row, so we traverse over the last row, we could just call it end row, and we are traversing over end column minus 1, right, so that would be end column minus 1 till our first column, right, so that would be start column. Okay, okay, let me just make it equals to end column minus 1. So end column is already updated. All right, end column is equals to end column minus 1. Here start row is equals to plus equals to 1. So basically start row is already equals to 1, and so we here started from the start row, right, so this one represents the start row. I'm just going to erase this. So this one represents our start row, and here this 0 represents our start column, and 2 represents our end column. Okay, end column, and that is what we did, start row, and this is basically the end row. Okay, we went all the way right from our updated start row to all the way down, right? So same we did here. We are now starting from our end row and from our updated end column to the start column. Okay, this way to the start column. Now we have reached here. Now we go from bottom to top, right? And since we already have traversed this cell, we are not going to traverse it again. So we are traversing the cell one row above that, right? That is why we are now updating end row. So end row will now be equals to end row plus minus 1, right? Because we are reducing the row count from 2, we are starting from 1. Okay, so that is what we do. So for that we are traversing over row, right, on column number 0, which is our start column. So our start column, as you could see, like we have not changed our start column, right? We are only changing our start row. Since we traversed over start row, we updated the start row. Since we traversed over the end column, we updated the end column. We traversed over end row, we update our end row. Now we are traversing over start column, starting from the end row, because we are moving from bottom to top, right? So from the last row to the top row, so that would be start row. Okay, and start row basically here is update date and it is equals to 1, so end row is also equals to 1 because it's updated here -1. So we'll just traverse only this row and then again we continue with this one. Basically we continue this process for the next remaining elements in the matrix. So we are just going to keep continuing until and unless, like, the start row should always be less than the end row. Okay, and the start column should always be less than the end column, right? Because we are traversing from one row to the other and we do not want to traverse the same already traversed row or column or like the cell, right? So we should keep that in mind. So while we are updating it, we should check it again, like if we the updated start row is greater than the end row, then we just break out of our loop, and then every time we are traversing, we just push the elements, the cells that we are traversing, to our answer array. So that is how we are going to solve this problem. Now let's go back to our code. So we are going to use this algorithm basically. Let's create an array to store our result. Okay, let's look at the constraint also. So m and n are between 1 and 10 and the values range from -100 to 100. Okay, you could just create a base case saying that m should be greater, n should be greater. So I'm just going to do that. Before that, let m is equals to matrix dot length and n equals to matrix 0. Okay, it might be the condition that there is no matrix m is equals to 0, right? Okay, so if m is equals to 0, then we return. If not, then we now check for the n. Okay, so if n is equals to 0, that is also when we return. Okay, so we are just going to return an empty array because that would mean that there are no elements and like the spiral traversal doesn't occur, and we're just returning empty array. Now if we have a matrix, then what are we going to do is we are just going to traverse over this cell, right? And we need a while loop for that. So while, I'm just going to use true. Okay, and I'm going to check for the condition. The condition should be that start row should be less than end row, start column should be less than end column. Okay, but since we are not updating the start row in the beginning, we are not going to check that in the beginning, so we traverse our start row here. So okay, we don't check in the beginning. So for let I is equals to 0, I is less than so we are traversing over the row, right, over each of the column of the row, so from start column to end column. So let's first define what our start column and end columns are, and start row and end row are. So I'm just going to represent it with SR, which means start row should be equals to 0, start column is also equals to 0, end row, which means the last row, is m minus 1, and end column, the last column here, is n minus 1. Okay, so now for I, okay, for I is equals to 0 until, so we are iterating over the column, right? So column moves from start column to end column, right, from left to right. So from start to end, start column. Okay, so we are going to use start column to end column, and I plus plus, we are going to increase, this would be equals. Okay, and we push to our answer array the matrix ix matrix value at the row, the start row, for all the columns. Okay, and now okay, and S double A, and what's wrong, and S. Okay, now we increment our start row here, plus plus, and now we need to check if start row is greater than end row, then we just break out of our loop. Okay, now next we again check for, like, so we are going from top to bottom, right, over each of the row for in the last column, right? So I starts from start row, and I is greater than equals to the end row. Okay, and I plus plus, so answer the push, we are pushing matrix, pushing like each of the values in the row, in the column, like, and which column is that? That's the last column, right, end column. So end column is EC. Okay, and then we increment our EC, and now we need to check if start column is less than, I mean it's start, okay, we do not increment EC, in EC should be decremented. Okay, start column, if it is less than EC, then we break from here. All right, now next we are going from right to left. Okay, so let I is equals to, right means from the last column to the first column, right? So end column I is greater than equals to the start column I plus plus. Since we have already done this EC minus minus, so we don't need to like worry about this being repeated again. Okay, so for that, now we are going to push to our answer array matrix, and that would be the end row, right? Since we are iterating over each of the end row, I mean the end row for each of the column in the end row. So now we increment, I mean decrement the end row, update our end row, and now we again need to check if start row is greater than end row. We just break. Next we iterate from, we are moving from now bottom to top. Okay, so bottom means last row to the start row. Okay, so let I is equals to end row, I is greater than equals to start row I minus minus. Okay. Oh yeah, here also we are going to do minus minus because we are going from last to beginning, right? So here it should decrement and push to our array the start column, right? Each of the rows in our start column, and then finally we are going to increment our start column, and then we check if start column is greater than the end column, we just break out of the loop. All right, and finally we are going to return our answer array. Now let's try to run our code and look if it works or not. Okay, so where did I use st? So this is start row. Okay, so it gave me the wrong answer. Okay, so where did we go wrong? So we are starting from the start row. For the start row, from start column to the end column. Okay, end column is n minus 1, and then now we incremented our start row, that is from the next row we are going for the end column, we are starting from the next row to the end row. Okay, next row to the end row, and row will increment, right? And for our end column, now from we reached here, now from our end column plus minus 1, that is starting from this point, which is ec minus minus to start column. Okay, from our end column to start column, greater than equals to, right? This should be e is less than equals to er. Yep, I minus minus, and then yeah, we are moving from last to start, so I decreases, and then from next row we just iterate over each of the column. No, basically each of the rows. Yeah, iterate over each of the row for the first column. So start column, we are iterating from er, which is the updated one, to the start. Now let's try to run. Okay, so that was the problem. Okay, doing plus plus here. Awesome, it worked. So let's look at the time complexity and the space complexity. Since we are using an answer array to store our result, the answer array would occupy m times n spaces. However, we do not usually consider our answer the spaces occupied by our results, but if we need to consider, it would be O of n times m space complexity. And talking about the time complexity, we are iterating over each of the element, right? Each of the element in the matrix at least once, right? So how many elements are there? Well, basically there are m times n number of elements in our matrix, right? So that would be O of m times n time complexity. So that's all about this solution. I hope you liked my solution, and let me know in the comments down below what do you think about it. And please don't forget to like my video and subscribe to my channel for more LeetCode daily challenge problems solution. Thank you.